Benjamin Franklin. I mean, if you read about Benjamin Franklin, like, when we think of Benjamin Franklin as this, bald, fat guy, and Ben Franklin was 6'1", when the average person in this country was considerably shorter than they are today. So, he was a tall guy, a good-looking guy in his younger days. But just unbelievable story. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the TomCast. This is the Tominator, your host, flying solo today. My lovely co-host, Sarah Magda, is preparing for her vacation in the Bahamas for the Hooter calendar shoot. So we look forward to seeing Sarah in 2 weeks and finding out how that went. Had Subway for lunch today. I know some people look down on Subway. I like Subway. The food is fresh. They prepare it quickly. You're in and out. It's not very expensive. So shout out goes to Subway. Other shout outs, my co-host Sarah. After last week's episode, I went to a restaurant in downtown Sarasota called Hyde Park. Really good restaurant if anyone's ever in Sarasota. There are other locations, I believe, in Pennsylvania and Ohio as well. I met some friends there for happy hour and dinner, had a couple Tito's and some surf and turf. So I asked Sarah what she was doing after the show, and she was going home to get her Hooters outfit on and delivering wings to a young boy who was sick. And I was like, wow, we all know that Sarah's beautiful, but also on the inside as well. So shout out goes to Sarah. Another shout out. John Bon Jovi. Sarah's not here. I wonder if she would know who John Bon Jovi is, but Hulu's coming out, I think, tomorrow with a 40th anniversary of Bon Jovi. It's like a multiple episode, broadcast. I grew up in New Jersey, as I mentioned prior episodes, probably about a half-hour drive from John Bon Jovi's childhood home. We weren't friends. I didn't hang out with him, but I did see him all the time, even before and after he was famous. I was real into the New Jersey rock club scene. If John were on the show, shout out to John. Open invitation again. Airfare and Hooters. That's our standard deal. Fountain Casino, Hunka Bunka Ballroom, Playpen Lounge, Birch Hill, Fast Lane, Bourbon Street. Remember them all. Bourbon Street actually is not a rock club. It's a gentleman's club. I used to frequent on numerous occasions back in the day. Another shout out is to Sydney Sweeney, who I'm sure Sarah would know who that is, a young actress. She's been in the news the last couple of weeks. I guess some producer who I don't know who it is was commenting about her looks and talent, and I'm thinking, I don't know who this guy is, but what is he looking at? I mean, she's a beautiful girl, extremely beautiful, and I saw her movie, it was a romantic comedy. They call them rom-coms, Anyone But You. And it's not like any, this is not any, Oscar-nominated film by any stretch, but it was enjoyable. I really liked it. She had great chemistry with her co-star, and shout out to Sydney Sweeney. Got a few corrections this week. Being an attorney, I'm really, you have to be. A lawsuit could hinge on whether an if or a but or an and or a why or one small word. You really need to be meticulous. And so a couple things that, and when I see movies, it irritates me when they get facts wrong. There was a movie, Field of Dreams, many years ago, and with Kevin Costner, and one of the, it was about famous baseball players that come back to life, and he builds a field and they play on it. Was one of the characters was Shoeless Joe Jackson, was a great baseball player in the early 1900s. Got banned from baseball for life for being involved in fixing the 1919 World Series, which many people don't believe he knew anything about it or was not involved. That's a story for another episode. But they had him batting right-handed in the movie. and I'm a student of baseball history. Joe Jackson batted lefty, so that kind of irritates me. Or like, I saw a movie more recently, Secretariat, about the great racehorse, and they got a lot of the facts wrong. That kind of irritates me when I do it, when they do it, and certainly when I do it. So a couple corrections. One is I mentioned Hall of Fame hockey player Phil Esposito as being big number 99. Wayne Gretzky was number 99. Phil Esposito wore number 7 when he played for the Boston Bruins and number 77 when he played for the New York Rangers. So I just want to make that correction. Also, I referred to trying to take a tour of the Tito's factory in Austin, Texas, and I said, like, they weren't having any tours. They don't have them anymore. In fact, they never had tours, so I must have had a miscommunication. Maybe I heard the guy wrong or I recollected wrong. I'm not sure, but never been tours at the Tito's factory. Another correction, the University of Texas Law Library, I mentioned it's the largest in the country. Actually, the Library of Congress is number 1, and I believe Harvard has more volumes. The University of Texas does have a tremendous law library, but it's not the largest. And lastly, last correction for this week is I invited Donald Trump and Joe Biden to Hooters for wings and beer. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump doesn't drink, so if he joins President Biden and myself at Hooters, he'll have to drink unsweet tea or Coke. So those are my corrections for this week. Next topic I'd like to discuss, and it's unfortunate that my co-host isn't here. She might be able to shed more light on this topic, is in light of what's been going on this week and in the last several years, is the Me Too movement. I'm like, if my life was around the golf, I'm on the back nine. I'm not a young guy. But I think the Me Too movement is a great thing. Like, I can remember being a young kid, graduated college, got my first quote unquote real job, and I saw some things that like upper management did that even one boss I remember was like encouraging me to do it. Like, hey, what about that girl? And it just the treatment that some of the women in the workforce were subjected to was just flat out wrong. I mentioned last week, like, even though it was hundreds of years ago, it was accepted. Like, to me, owning slaves is just inherently wrong. You don't need to read the law. Just like committing a murder, you don't need to read the law to know that's wrong. And like, forcing a woman to do something she doesn't want to do is just inherently wrong. And I've always tried never to be that guy. But I'll start off with Bill Cosby, because I guess his allegations go back. I mean, there are allegations against Bill Cosby going back to 1965, and like none of us were there. Like it's a he said, she said. But like so many women, and the story's like the same. They woke up and they felt they were drugged. I mean, I did think the time he was convicted in Pennsylvania was wrong, and the conviction was overturned, not because he didn't do it. I don't know that he did or didn't do what he was charged with, but the law is the law, and it has to be followed. Like, a wrongful conviction is a wrongful conviction. But it's another one. Harvey Weinstein. It's in the news today. His rape conviction in New York was overturned on appeal. And it's, I don't know, again, whether Harvey Weinstein committed these heinous acts, even though he was convicted of rape in Los Angeles, and so he's in jail for that as well. But what happened, the reason the conviction in New York was overturned was the lower court allowed in testimony from women that he had not even been charged with. It was just, he had never been, convicted of anything or even arrested for anything related to those women. So, give you some legal commentary. It can be a tough call sometimes for a judge to make, whether or not, like, quote unquote prior bad acts should be allowed in evidence. So, like, if you're charged with committing murder, if say 10 years before you had sold cocaine, does that have anything to do with whether you committed murder now? So they call it, the test is usually the probative value versus the prejudicial effect. So the judge has to weigh that out. And I actually agree with the appellate court in New York. I mean, it appears that Harvey Weinstein is just a monster. I mean, like, so many women have come forward with allegations against him. But, bringing women in, bringing up stuff that he wasn't even charged with, I think the appellate court in New York got that one right. Danny Masterson, some may remember, he was a co-star of That 70s Show, a TV program. It was pretty popular. It was on for quite a few years. I was a big fan of that show as well. Multiple women, made rape allegations against him. And his first trial ended in a mistrial. And for those who don't know the law, mistrial is when the jury can't come to a unanimous verdict. So they have to start all over, or the prosecution can drop the matter. In Danny Masterson's case, they did not drop the matter, and he was convicted, and I guess he's doing 30 years in jail. And now we don't know. P. Diddy, Sean, I remember him as Puff Daddy. I actually like that nickname better, but he goes by P. Diddy now, Sean Combs. He has not been charged with any crime, but apparently he's under investigation for similar, whether rape or kidnapping, things like that related to women. Again, we don't know that he has committed any crime. What I don't understand, though, for me, just an average-looking regular guy, is these are rich, good-looking guys. Like, you would think they can get all the women they want for free, but without having to commit illegal acts. So I don't get it. But I'm sure a lot of women are out there. A lot of women don't come forward, whether embarrassment or they don't want their boyfriend or husband to know, somehow to make them look like they did something wrong. But it's really, you like to think in a lot of ways our country has progressed. As I mentioned on last episode, slavery's gone, and I like to think it hasn't gone away, but racism's a lot less than when I was a kid. Even words that were said when I was a kid are not used anymore. So maybe we're progressing as a society. And hopefully at some point these type things will go away. I guess it just goes from generation to generation. Parents bringing up their kids the right way, that this is wrong and not the way you want to behave. But on the other side of it, like, how do you defend an allegation that is made by someone from 30 years ago? Like, if someone comes forward who knew me 30 years ago and says I did something wrong, like, how do I find witnesses or defend myself against that? I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know this type of behavior, as I said, needs to go away, and hopefully at some point it will go away. As I mentioned in past episodes, I'm a huge fan of history, and I don't know why. One guy who I'm really I don't want to say obsessed with, but really interested in, I guess is a better word, is Benjamin Franklin. I mean, if you read about Benjamin Franklin, when we think of Benjamin Franklin as this bald, fat guy, and Ben Franklin was 6'1", when the average person in this country was considerably shorter than they are today. So he was a tall guy. A good-looking guy in his younger days, but just unbelievable story. The things that he was responsible for, we all know him being one of our founding fathers. He was a notorious womanizer, and now back then they called it illegitimate. Now, that's when you have a child that was not born by your mother, by your wife, but now we call it a child born outside marriage. But he had an illegitimate son named William Franklin, who was the governor of New Jersey. So during the American Revolution, his own son sided with the British. So they were on opposite sides of a war, father and son, which is, amazing. But nowadays you hear all kinds of allegations of, famous people, whether it be politicians or business people or whatever, that have, children out there that, not the outside of their marriage. And Franklin didn't hide it at all. Like he made it clear that he had that child. I thought that was very interesting that he was straightforward with that. But during the American Revolution, like the great world powers, I guess at that time were England and France. So we're fighting England, and now France, we're trying to get France to join our side. And I think the French were worried about, well, if we side with these Americans and they lose, then the British are going to turn on us. They were kind of hedging their bets a little bit. And so we're trying to get France to join us and help us win the war. So they decided to send Ben Franklin over there. And instead of dealing with the noblemen, like the politicians and whatever, to get them to join our side, he goes through the women. Like the women loved Ben Franklin. Like he was apparently really smooth, and knew how to treat women right. And one famous quote that I read is this one woman. This is before you had electric light and everything. So you didn't have TV, you didn't have computer, cell phone, things like that. So when it got dark, I mean, you either went to sleep or you knew what. There was only one other thing you could do really, and use your imagination. And this one woman saw him in the summer and said, "Ben, you're not calling me. What's going on?" And he said, "You're not interested?" And he goes, "Absolutely not." He goes, I'm just waiting for the nights to get longer, because as we all know, in the winter, it gets dark earlier." I know that was a great line if you think about it. Merely waiting for the nights to grow longer. I love that. I love that line. Of course, I love that Ben is on $100 bill. my favorite piece of money, I guess. But you think of he was involved in the French. Ultimately, by the way, did join our side, and we won the revolution. The things that he was involved in, Declaration of Independence, the things he invented, or was it responsible? He was a founder of the University of Pennsylvania, which is one of the best Ivy League school, one of the best colleges in our country. The public library, the Philadelphia Fire Department. He was the first postmaster general of our country, really a proponent of post offices, which maybe that's kind of going by the wayside nowadays. I wonder when and if I won't live to see it, whether there will be no more post office, but who knows. The lightning rod, as we all know, remember when you were a kid in grammar school with the kite. Bifocals, which I had bifocals because I'm nearsighted. I can see better without my glasses close up. I just can't see far. So I had bifocals, and I dropped them and broke them. There was no alcohol involved. That's the official position. But they said it would take 2 weeks to get the new ones. So I just said, I need glasses right now, and I haven't gotten a chance to go back and get the bifocals. But I think Ben Franklin invented that, the Franklin stove. Also, he played a whole bunch of musical instruments. He was great at chess, the board game chess, which I love that game. I used to play it when I was a kid. I was pretty good. I'll tell you a funny chess story. When I'm in high school, I'm a senior in high school, and we had a chess team. You'd play other schools, and I can't be on it. And we had two. The way it works is, at least when I was in high school, your team would have 5 players, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you'd play the other school. So 1 would play 1, 2 would play 2. So if you won 3 out of the 5 matches, you won the match. So we had 2 kids that were younger than me who were really good, very smart, chess prodigies. So they knew all they needed was one more good player, and we would never lose. So they heard that I was good at chess, throughout the school, and they come to me. These 2 kids, one was a freshman, one is a sophomore. I'm a senior, and they're like, "We want you to join the chess team." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I can't be seen on the chess team, No, come on. If we get you, we'll win every match." And I said, "All right, no one can know about this. I will join because I really wanted to play. The truth is I wanted to play. So I said, I'll join, but you got to keep it on the down low. If like, I have a hard enough time getting dates if women hear that I'm on the chess team, So no problem. So I joined and we win our first match. Those two guys win, I win. We had other guys that were pretty good too, like a couple of buddies of mine from high school. So we had a really good team. So, at least when I was in high school, you had morning announcements. They would talk about like what sports teams won and what events about the day. We're going to have an assembly today or whatever was going on. And they're like, yeah, the chess team beat, whoever, blah, blah, blah. And the winners were, and they announced their name and my name. And I'm like, oh, man. People were looking at me, and I'm like, oh, man. So they broke the rules. So, like, word got out there I was on the chess team. But what's funny, amendment to the story, I'm playing chess in, study hall one day, and the most beautiful girl in our high school comes walking up, and she's watching us play. And I'm thinking, she's so out of my league, it's not even funny. And, she's just sitting there watching me and this other nerdy guy play chess. And I look back on it now and like, did I need an engraved invitation? Like she really gave a damn if I was playing chess. Well, that's one I missed out on. What are you going to do? I think back of that and I laugh like, what, I must have been totally clueless. So anyway, Ben Franklin was a fan of chess. Maybe I'll get back into it one day. He frequented prostitutes. Like he wasn't even shy about it. He wasn't shy about it. Like in his autobiography, he used to call them low women. Like that's amazing. As I mentioned, the illegitimate son, but also that, like nowadays, like no politician would ever admit that he saw a prostitute, whether he did or not. And he wasn't shy. So I give him credit. I don't agree with the behavior necessarily, but I give him credit for, being straightforward and honest, that he frequented prostitutes and he wasn't afraid to talk about it. I always end with a quote. I got a quote from Ben Franklin. I think he stole it from the Bible. Actually, I'm not a major student of the Bible. I read it when I was a kid, but I can't quote very much from the Bible. But he wrote a letter to this woman who, he was very smooth guy, a womanizer type guy. And he said, he was talking about wine, and he said, constant proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. He was talking about wine, and like, I'll drink wine occasionally. I have friends, like I know some women that they drink a glass of wine every night or a couple glasses. That's not me. I'll have it at like a wedding or something, but I don't dislike wine. I like Tito's better. So, but I do think that's a great line. Constant proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. So that's, I think about it. I mentioned last episode of so many great movies are based on true events, like Gone with the Wind, the Titanic, Godfather. I think a Ben Franklin movie would really, this is a shout out to some film producers out there. Like, we got a revolution going on. We got sex. I mentioned that, Ben with that, all the things he invented, his son on the other side, him going to France and getting the French women to talk to their husbands about joining our side. Like, I mean, that would really be a good movie, I think. And he's on the $100 bill. And I even have the theme song. When Michael Jackson was a little kid, there was a movie called Ben. I remember watching it when I was a kid on TV. And it was about a rat. Ben was a rat. And, like a rat that, a pet rat. And Michael Jackson sang the theme song called Ben. You could YouTube it. And I'm like, so we got our theme song, and I even got the trailer. Is when a trailer, when you go to movies and they call it coming attractions. A giant $100 bill comes up on the screen while you're in the movie eating your popcorn and your Twizzlers. Again, shout out to Twizzlers. I love those. Try not to eat them that much, trying to watch the weight. But I can't resist. So we got the trailer, we got the theme song, we got war, we got sex, we got money. And Ben made a lot of money. And another thing about Ben, back then, I guess now they would call it like interning. What you did a lot of trades back then, you'd work for somebody, like say you wanted to be a shoemaker, you'd work for a shoemaker, and he would teach you the business. And then in return, you had to work for him for so long. So he was taught, really not so much today, but printing presses were real big back then. So he worked in Boston for a printer who taught him the business. And so instead of working for him, he split for Philadelphia. It didn't work off. He ran away to Philadelphia and didn't work it off. So really interesting guy, Ben Franklin, one of our founding fathers. All right, so that's it for my Ben Franklin discussion. Next topic I want to touch on is gambling. When I was a kid, where I grew up in New Jersey, gambling was pretty big. There were like illegal bookies. Everyone knew who they were, like around town. The second state, obviously for many years, the only state where casinos were illegal was Nevada, Las Vegas, Reno. And then the second state to New Jersey legalized gambling in 1976, only in Atlantic City. And the first casino actually opened in 1978. I was a little kid, so I wasn't old enough to go in the beginning. But those were the only two states. You couldn't bet on sports unless you had an illegal bookie. Racetracks were really big, where that's kind of like dying out. We'll be talking more about horse racing next week. One of my guests is the Kentucky Derby's coming up. The first Saturday in May is the Kentucky Derby. And I'm going to have with Sarah off. I do have a special guest coming in next week. And we're going to talk about, among other topics, the Kentucky Derby. But horse racing was really big back then. It's kind of like a dying. Dog racing is almost extinct. And horse racing is, a lot of horse tracks have closed down. But now gambling is just exploding in the United States. As I mentioned, you had two states that had casinos, and now I think it's something like over 40 states have casinos. And sports betting, as I said, was illegal, but now it's legal. There was a Supreme Court case a few years ago. The state of New Jersey initiated it because they wanted to get a piece of the sports betting. And the argument was, well, people are still betting on sports. They're just doing it with illegal bookmakers, so the state should get a piece of that money. But now it's like out of control. You can bet on your app, like on your phone. Just get an app on your phone to bet on sports, and it's becoming fashionable. Like one thing, gambling was always confined to older people, like whether you went to Vegas or went to the racetrack. Like young kids weren't even allowed in those places, and even if they were, they really didn't want to go. But now with the sports betting, like these high school kids are into it. And I remember when I was a kid, I was as I mentioned last week, a huge sports fan. The commentators could not talk about betting. Like, so they would have guys pick the games, like when Sunday morning, they used to have a show, I used to love it, called the NFL Today, was on before the first game. And Brent Musburger was the host, and Phyllis George, who was a beautiful woman, ended up marrying the governor of Kentucky, a man named John Y. Brown, who had bought Kentucky Fried Chicken from Colonel Sanders. So Phyllis George, I was in love with her too. Add her to the list. Sarah was one of the hosts of NFL Today. Irv Cross, who was a retired football player, and they had a handicapper, a guy named Jimmy the Greek Snyder, who was from Ohio. Jimmy the Greek was like a legendary gambler, and he would pick the games, but he never mentioned a point spread or anything like that. He just had check marks of who he thought was going to win. They were never allowed to mention it. And then I remember watching Monday Night Football when I was a kid, and the game is over. Like one team's up by like 30 points in the fourth quarter, and one of the announcers said something to the effect, "Well, there's really nothing more to play for here." And then the other announcer says he knew that the over-under, they have something if you bet on football called an over-under. Like you're not betting on who wins the game, just the total number of points scored in the game. So say if the over-under is 40, in the game it's 20-19, that would be an under. But if any more points are scored, that would put it over. So the one announcer made a comment, well, there is one thing left that people are concerned about. And he didn't say if you were gambling, you knew what he meant. But that was a no-no. But now if you watch football, it's all over the TV, like at the bottom of the screen. Like even I watch the Yankees. I mentioned I'm a Yankee fan. Like when a guy's up at bat, they have advertisements behind. All the teams do this now. Like you can, when you're watching the batter, you can see the advertisements behind it. I'm thinking about advertising maybe for the Tampa Bay Rays, but I don't know how much it's going to cost. Anyway, Tominatorlaw.com. Anyway, so like now it's all over. They even have like, and now the leagues even, it used to be an absolute no-no. Any affiliation with gambling. Now the leagues, whether it be baseball, football, and they actually fought to keep it illegal in every state except Nevada. I mentioned the New Jersey Supreme Court case. But now they're getting a piece of the money. They joined up with these gambling. So they've done a complete 180. But it used to be an absolute no-no for like anyone to talk about gambling, and now it's all over the place. You can't hide from it. And people think, well, I'm sure you see it like all the time. Like, well, this money goes to senior citizens or education, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure that's true to some degree, but people don't realize the downside of gambling. I mean, there's people out there losing their homes, losing their jobs, committing crimes to get money to gamble. Like it's easier to hide. If you're an everybody knows an alcoholic or a drug addict in their family or friends or whatever. You know, it's easy to tell. They're like, but gambling's a lot easier for the person doing it to hide. You know, I mean, you maybe tell they're a little off for some reason, maybe just think they're having a bad day, but it's a lot easier to hide than being an alcoholic or a drug addict. There are a lot of hidden costs that I don't think society realizes, but it's politically expedient. If you're running for office, you say, let's build a casino. People are going to Vegas. Instead of going to Vegas, they'll gamble in our state and we'll get the money, but there are some holdout states that don't want gambling, and I think maybe they made the right decision looking back on it. Recently, I mentioned that Joe Jackson was banned from baseball for life for allegedly being involved in fixing the 1919 World Series. Even though he had a great World Series, he played great in that game. I think most sports historians feel that Joe Jackson was like illiterate. He wasn't educated. Great player though. And they say maybe he knew about it and just didn't rat out the other guys. So he gets banned for life because he didn't rat on his teammates that were involved in fixing the World Series. So Pete Rose, I mentioned last week, I think apparently they have definitive proof that he did bet on baseball games, but never bet against his team. So he was betting on his team winning. And you could say that's wrong. I understand why baseball didn't want that happening. The integrity of these games is everything, whatever sport it is. But, I can't see. I mean, he was my idol growing up, but I can't see Pete Rose ever fixing a game, like tanking a game, not trying to win. He always was trying to win. And there were players that bet. I think there's a lot of evidence that Ty Cobb and Tris Speaker, who are two Hall of Fame players, like great all-time greats, they played each other in like one of the last games of the year, and supposedly they tanked the game and bet on it. I think Ty Cobb denied it until he died. But there is a lot of evidence that says maybe they were betting against, betting on that game, at least one game. But you look at Pete Rose, I mean, there's players that have been, caught using drugs like 9 times and still get to keep playing. And that doesn't affect the integrity of the game. If a player's on drugs and playing, he can't be at his best. Or like Mickey Mantle was one of my father's heroes growing up. That was before my time, but I think there's a lot of evidence that Mickey Mantle was an alcoholic and would be, if not drunk, certainly probably hungover in a lot of games. And no one ever, banned Mickey Mantle for being hungover. I mean, if you're hungover, you're not going to play as well as, certainly if I have a big court case, I'm not going out drinking the night before. I might go after the case, but not the night before. But I don't know. I just, more recently, there was a player on the Toronto Raptors, NBA basketball team, not a star player by any means, like one of the worst players on the team, but they have something nowadays what they call proposition bets, prop bets for short. Like you're not betting on who wins the game. You might just pick a player. Like say you want to bet on LeBron James scoring 20 points or more or less. they'll set it at a number. So if you think he's going to have a good game, you'll bet that LeBron James scores more than 20 points or whatever number they set it at for that particular game. So this player on the Toronto Raptors, I think his name was Jontay Porter. I apologize for, I can't remember. He was not a star player, as I said. I know his brother's a really good player for another team in the NBA. But his prop bets were like that he would score like 6 points in a game. So if he scored less than 6 and you bet under, you would win. If he scored more than 6, you'd have to bet the over 6. And apparently friends of his were betting these prop bets with him. And what apparently he did is a couple games, they put him in, and then he just said, hey, I have a headache or I'm sick, and would play like a couple minutes and then have to be taken out of the game. And that obviously would be an under because he only played a few minutes of the game. So he was recently banned for life. I mean, I totally agree with that ruling, but let me just say this. I have no firsthand knowledge of what anyone in any sports league is doing. I don't have any personal friends that are athletes. But if you think this Porter situation is isolated, I got a bridge to sell you. Another major thing is one of the best players in Major League Baseball is a Japanese player named Ohtani, plays for the Los Angeles Dodgers, makes like $70 million a year. And he doesn't speak English. He's from Japan. He's been in the major leagues for a few years now. He has an interpreter who came, who they assigned him when he came to the United States. And they became apparently best friends. And like the interpreter lost like millions of dollars gambling to bookmakers, and the money came out of Ohtani's account. And like you heard mixed stories. Like first it was like, he lent his friend the money to help him out. And then now they're saying that he had no knowledge of these, first of all, I can't imagine the millions of dollars are withdrawn from your bank account and you don't know. That boggles my mind that that's possible. I realize Ohtani does speak English and his interpreter probably did a lot for him, but I just can't imagine that. But one thing that there's zero doubt in my mind, this is my personal opinion, if you're close friends or apparently best friends with somebody and you don't know that they're gambling millions of dollars, like my best friends, I know what their favorite restaurant is. I know if they like to drink or use drugs or gamble or have sex. If it's someone close to you, you know what their favorite car is, if they drive fast or like my friends know I'm a bad driver. I don't drive fast. I'm not aggressive. I'm just a bad driver. Like, I have trouble parallel parking, or like even some people don't want to drive with me because they're like afraid they're going to get in an accident. I text and drive. I know I'm not supposed to do it. I know it's illegal. Sometimes I'll do it if a client texts me. But like, so it's a joke amongst my friends, like Tom's a bad driver. So you know what your friends are doing is my point. So like, I just find that hard to believe. So again, I'm not saying Ohtani was involved with gambling by any means. I'm not implying that, but there's no doubt in my mind that he had to know what his friend was doing. So, it's going to get worse. Like, I guess people look at gambling as, there's a line from The Godfather. I mentioned The Godfather, perhaps my all-time favorite movie, and like, so this is like the 1950s, and the mob guys are all have a meeting of all the mob bosses from the whole country. They meet in New York, and the topic of the meeting is, do we want to get involved in dealing drugs? We're talking like cocaine, heroin, stuff like that when it was first coming around, and they're having a debate about it. Like some of the mob guys are like, hey, you make tons of money in this, we got to get in on this. And the Godfather, who was like the head of the boss of bosses, like the biggest crime boss, is like, he had a lot of politicians in his back pocket that he was paying off, and judges, things like that. And he's like, he makes a comment. He goes, I do have a lot of friends in politics, he goes, but they will not be my friends anymore. They look at gambling as a harmless vice, which I think a lot of people do look at gambling as a harmless vice. You want to do it, go do it. Who are you hurting? And his point was drugs, they look at as a dirty business. People die from drugs, overdose and what have you. But there's a lot of harm that comes from gambling. And actually, I read an article that they say between drugs, alcohol, and gambling addiction, which one of those three are there more suicides? And I think they say gambling is 4 times the amount of suicides as drugs. So it's a major problem in this country. I guess so. I'm going to get off my soapbox, anti-gambling soapbox for today. I just want to give a quick preview for next week. Got a good buddy, known him for a million years, owns a real high-end collision center in New Jersey where I'm from, named Tony Lake. He fixes Mercedes, Porsche, Audi, BMW, Bentley, stuff like that. Tony has a lot of manufacturer certifications where he sends his employees to school, has to buy equipment, they have to go through training, things of that nature. He spends a lot of money on that. And he's going to talk about, which you don't know if you get in an accident and you go to a body shop, what your insurance company's doing. You just think that they're going to pay for what's fair. Your body shop's going to fix your car. That's the average person doesn't have any idea what insurance companies do. A lot of times the collision center is forced to go along. What choice do they have? The unsafe repairs, shoddy repairs. It's a big issue in this country. So Tony is going to shed some light on that. I happen to know a lot about it myself, having been involved in that business for many years also. So Tony's going to be a guest. I think everybody will like him. He's Mr. Personality. And also, as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit, even though I personally don't gamble, as you could probably tell, we're going to talk a little bit about the Kentucky Derby. I think I mentioned last week to Sarah when she was here that there are certain things that if you get the opportunity, to go to the Kentucky Derby is crazy expensive. They triple the price of hotels and restaurants and everything. But if anyone ever gets the opportunity, it is what we call a slice of Americana, I believe is the term. The beauty of it, the women are all in their dresses and hats, and they play at My Old Kentucky Home, and the horses are beautiful. Horses come out. I know there's a lot of people who think horse racing should be banned, that it's harmful to the horses. Horses are dying, things like that. Gambling related, of course. But we're going to talk a little bit about the Kentucky Derby. Tony knows a lot more about that, I think, than I do at this stage. And I think it'll be a real interesting episode. So I hope to see you all here next week. And we hope to see the lovely Sarah back in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone.